Thank you very much, Russ. As Russ says, I am Shani, or Shani Thompson, and I will be talking about my game, Artisan Bay. So I have a couple of slides to go through, so I shall begin. Right, so my game is called Artisan Bay, and it's played on itch. I made it using Unity. So my journey into game development is quite an eclectic one. I started off in fashion design as like a seamstress and pattern cutter, and then decided that actually I'd like to try teaching. And so I did tutoring and mentoring and youth work. And then I decided that I would like to do more research into the ethical and sustainable aspects of design. And so I did an MA in design and environment, which made me really want to explore even more about the way that people use things, and that kind of led me to independent games and playable experiences. And so today I'm going to be talking about my game, Artisan Bay, which was directly inspired by my dissertation question, which was, how is the abstract knowledge of crafts and material properties shared with the user in simulation role-play video games? So quite a lengthy title, but I really wanted to look at crafts and materials and how in simulation role-play video games they are kind of portrayed to players. It was really important to me to explore that. So I felt that that Grow, Dickinson, Pagnuti, Wardrip, and Matthias really defined what crafting is when they said that in games it is a collection of mechanics which enable a player to create virtual objects. So that was the way that I developed my game. So developments from my dissertation, obviously the inclusion of crafting and material properties. My research analysed multiple avenues, including the points of views of players, the intentions of the developers, and the social cultural influences. So when I say cultural influences, in games, there are the cultural influences that developers put in there because of their own backgrounds or intentionally, but there's also, especially in creative games, those that players bring to the games because of their own like desires, likes, and personal backgrounds, which led me into kind of thinking about the ethics and the choices and the considerations that we allow players to have, because obviously in a game there are rules, there are limitations. And so that led me further into thinking about an economical structure and their influence on craft. So as I go through my game, you will notice that it doesn't have an economical structure. And the reason for that was because the more I researched it, the more I found that actually it changed the value of the crafts based on my own preconceptions. And I thought, that's not what I want for my game. I want people to explore and just experiment and find their own value, not for me to put a value on it. And this made me think about removing the barriers between crafters and crafts, because the thing about video games is that, especially because they are a simplification in a way of real world mechanics, you can remove the barriers for not being able to find rare materials or expensive materials, or not having certain tools. And I added this because I thought it was important to mention. In my game, you will notice that almost all the characters are wearing some sort of mask. This was originally included in my game because I was looking into the idea of that when you are crafting, there is lots of dust and particles which you breathe in. And obviously lockdown happened, and so now masks are a very common part of fashion, but that was not why it was included in my game. It just happens to coincide with what's going on now, ironically. So in my game, there is a narrative element. where you discuss and you reveal the history of the town. You get to hear crafters' opinions and explore some of the material properties within the game. So, for example, the town is called Artisan Bay, but it was actually a mining village, and that's why there's so many raw materials around. And so that kind of sets the context of the game, why you can find so many tools and everything just scattered around the world. And the mayor of the town is kind of like a dabbler, and he likes lots of different crafts, so he's always very excited about everything that's going on and like telling you to talk to people. And so I really wanted to bring in that aspect of crafting, that community that crafting creates. So moving on to the main part of my game, which is the mini game mechanics. I wanted the mini games to blur the lines between playing and gaming. So as I said, games have an aspect where they have rules that limit what the player can do, and I wanted to have some mini games that included rules that limited the player, but some that felt rather freeing, like there weren't a lot of limitations or rules that stopped the players from doing certain things. So first of all, I have a crafting UI system. So you go around, you collect items in the world, and they go in your inventory. And then from that, you can actually create different items that appear in your house where the little hammers are placed. So that was the crafting UI. It's very simple and quite classic of most video games, but I didn't want to change it too much. I did have it so that you can actually see all of the objects all the time, and you can see whether you have the items or not. And if you press make and you don't have the items, then it just won't make it. It's quite a simple interface. So the pottery minigame is one that I am particularly proud of, because even though it's quite simple in terms of how you engage with it, it was actually really fun to make, and it is still one of my favorite ones to test. So it is you left click to make the pottery layers wider and right click to make the pottery layers smaller. And you can even hold down and drag the mouse, and it will do, if you're left clicking, it will make the pottery layers wider, and so on and so forth. I also added an element where you could actually change the clay type, and it is very simple. It's just rows, but together they kind of create the illusion of pottery. And then you've got the wheel animation that makes it look like it's all spinning. And I really wanted to take inspiration from real world pottery and try and see how much of that I could put in the game while not having the limitations of materials. So the drawing and painting actually originate from almost identical codes, and then branched off into different aesthetics. So with the drawing, you can only use small triangle pixels, and you have different shades of grey. Whereas with the painting, each brush has a different shape when you paint something on your canvas, and you can pick different colours. And then when you save it, it will send it to the picture frames in your house. So these were quite interesting to work with, and really quite challenging to think about how to limit them, but also how to push the boundaries to allow players to feel like they had the freedom of kind of being artistic. But I also wanted to make them a little bit challenging, so that whether you were a great artist or not the greatest artist in the world, it equally challenged you to kind of create something beautiful. Even for me, like I drew all the artwork for this game, and as you can see, my boat is not the greatest boat in the world, but that's what made these mini games quite fun, because it never turned out the way you expected. So the knitting mini game was, I think, the most challenging, because I wanted to capture some aspect of knitting from real world crafts, and trying to put that into a mini game, I found it really, really challenging. So in the end, I decided that I wanted to capture the rhythmic nature of knitting. So the flow that you get into once you understand the pattern and you know what stitches you're doing. And so this game is modeled after like classic rhythm and music games. And you've got the K, P, Y, B keys on the keyboard that stand for knit, purl, yarn over, and bobbling. And once you get into the rhythm, it is quite easy to kind of like master this game. And based on your score, when you exit the game or when the game ends and it exits for you, you have a little knitted item appear on your bed in the world. So I'm quite proud of this game as well, but it was quite a challenge to get it working and then to get the keys falling in the right order to match with the music. But yeah, it's quite fun. So when I did my research, I wanted to think about the player input. So I made up a calculation to calculate the player input percentage, focusing on the engagement time. So how long players actually were part of the process of clicking or actually doing something in order to produce the item. And then the craft time was how long it took after the players finished engaging for the item to be made. And for my particular game, I really wanted to have all of my games be at least 80% player input. So for me, I removed a lot of the kind of animations that are in classical crafting games that you would have to show the item being made. Not because I think that those are wrong or bad. I think they're a fantastic idea because they show an element of crafting that's really fantastic and reflective of the real world. But because for my particular game, it was about player engagement. And so that's why I didn't have a lot of those things. The only animations I had were ones to just kind of replicate the craft while the players were engaging. In addition to this, I also had a skills panel because I realized that there was no mark of kind of how far you'd come from when you started each task. So the mini games actually all fall into artistry. So it doesn't matter which mini game you decide to pursue. You could pursue one or all of them and your artistry will go up bit by bit. The making is specifically related to the crafting UI, and the foraging is related to the items you've actually collected in the world. And then the social is related to talking to NPCs. I only included skills that were things that were actually part of the game. So the skills were actually put in last because I didn't want to have them first and have them be things that I was forcing the player to do that weren't really relevant to the way that the game had developed. So they were kind of one of the last things to be decided and put in. So yes, that is my presentation. Are there any questions about the game or anything I've said or anything anyone would like me to expand on?
Hi, Shani.
Hi.
I've been kind of monitoring the YouTube channel, and at this time, it doesn't appear to have any questions. So let's see here. Oh, okay. There is one. I'd like to know more about how and why you did/modified the economic structure in the game as, say, compared to real work economic structures.
There were lots of kind of like different reasons. So one of the main reasons I said was that I didn't want to I didn't want to give a value to the craft based on my own personal value of crafting. And I also didn't want to make it so that because some of the materials are rare, but I didn't want to make it so that they were inaccessible to certain players, because I feel like that reflection of the real world was not what I wanted to bring to my game. I wanted it to be open and accessible to anyone who played it. So in a way, it was kind of the thought process of wanting to create that idealized world where anyone can do anything and be anything and make all the things.
Okay. There are a couple more questions just popped in, so just give me a moment and I'll read them off.
It's fine.
The first one is, who is your game aimed at?
So my game is more aimed at people who enjoy crafting, but maybe don't. So my game is a short game. It's not something that you would play long term. So it's aimed at people who like crafting, but just want to kind of like try something a little bit new, but something that they know they don't have to commit to for a long time. So just a little bit of fun, something they could like pick up and put down at any point. So I was thinking about people who maybe enjoy games like farming games or crafting or other crafting games or exploration games.
Okay, and one more question. This one's from Alex. Did it feel therapeutic to work on a passion project like this during lockdown?
Oh, I haven't thought about that. It definitely made it easier when certain code wasn't working or something broke to kind of keep continuing, because it was something I was passionate about and I really had this idea in mind of what I wanted to achieve by the end. And so it really made it easier to keep going when it felt like I was hitting a brick wall constantly.
Okay. Well, you've been going for about 15 minutes or so, and for that, thank you very much. We are going to take a break, so we're going to just go mute and whatnot, so we can switch out our interpreters and give the next presenter an opportunity, me, to prepare our slides and whatnot. So everyone who's watching via YouTube, just be patient with us. Thank you very much. And I'm going to go ahead and mute myself. Shani, you can go ahead and head back to the breakout room on your own. I can't control that. So thank you very much. See you all in just a few minutes.